Hey pals, I'm here today to talk about all of my unread books, which are all here on this one bookshelf. I only have two bookshelves out now, one of unread books and then this one behind me is books I read last year that I really enjoyed and like books I want to feature in videos and reread and stuff like that. And the rest of my books are in boxes because I had a bit of an accident with my bigger bookshelves, which we're hoping to replace, but we just haven't got around to it yet. So I thought I would sort of just quickly talk you through an overview of how they're set out and then get closer and talk about each book. I think there's 70 books here in total, although we may have miscounted. This top shelf is all the books that I've either been sent from publishers or bought myself so far this year. And my plan is ideally I want to read a book within a few weeks of it coming into the house, which obviously hasn't happened because some of these are from January. So I'm really trying to get back on top of that. And then this shelf is all the books I either bought myself or was sent as gifts, or maybe a couple of ARCs here from publishers in 2021 that I didn't manage to read. Obviously there was a lot more books that came into the house last year that I did read. And then this last shelf down here, which you can only just see, is all the books I've had longer than that. So I had them before 2021. Most of them I've had for the last 5 years, but there are a couple I can see here that I know I've had for 8 or 9 years, which is obviously not good. So the reason I split my books out like this, firstly, the reason I split out my unread from read books is because I used to have them all mixed in together, and then I felt like it wasn't so easy to keep track of what I hadn't read, so I started pulling the unread books forward. I also tried like putting a little sticky note on the spine of all the unread books, and it still looked a bit cluttered and messy. So I decided to move them all over to separate, years ago, probably 5 years ago, maybe even longer. And then only more recently, in the last year or so, have I split books out by how long I've had them. And the reason I've decided to do that is because it makes me even more aware of the books I'm reaching for and the books I'm ignoring. Because I know for a fact that I think I've only read one book so far this year off this bottom shelf, which is pretty bad. The vast majority of books I've read have been off this shelf and they've like just cycled in and out quite quickly. And then there's been a few I've read off this shelf. So really, the method should be that this should be the most important shelf, then this, and then this one last, and I just shouldn't acquire that much for this shelf until I've gotten these two down. If you're wondering like why I want to reduce it, I've done a sort of goals video chatting about my reasons for wanting to have a smaller TBR. I completely get that doesn't work for everyone, and I have absolutely zero judgment. I think people can have whatever TBRs they want, of course. But for me right now, I know I just want to have like a maximum of like 30 unread books. Like this top shelf genuinely feels to me like a decent amount of books for me to be able to choose between, bearing in mind I use the library a lot. So above all these, where you can't see, I currently have 15 books out from the library I haven't read. So to always have this amount of unread books plus the library feels like enough to me. So yeah, I'd really like to, that's my phone, I'd really like to reduce the rest. So now I'm going to zoom in and talk you through each of the books. Okay, so this is the top shelf. This has the fewest books on it because these are the books I've either been sent so far this year from publishers to read and review, or books that I have bought myself to read. And you'll spot there's a couple of bookmarks in some of these because I'm actually currently reading them, so this shelf, as I said, definitely has the most turnover compared to the others. So this first one is an advanced reader's copy, so it hasn't got like a proper cover, but this is The Hemlock Cure by Joanne Byrne. This is a historical fiction novel. I think I was sent this unrequested, but I was pretty interested in it, so I kept it. Haven't heard much about it, so do let me know if you've read it. Then this is another one that I didn't request but was sent a copy of, and that is White on White by Aizagul Savas. This is a fairly short book. Again, I think I've had a couple of people talk about this, but it's one I haven't picked up yet. Devotion by Hannah Kent is one I've requested because I've read both of her previous novels and really enjoyed them, and I've heard great things about this one, so definitely want to pick it up soon. And then we have Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I absolutely love this cover, I think it's brilliant. And I requested this one because I quite enjoyed her short story collection, but I just really love the sound of this novel. And again, I've been hearing really excellent things about this one. Then this is one I pre-ordered and it came out in January, and that is I Love You But I've Chosen Darkness by Claire Vaye Watkins. This was a bit of a risk because I DNF'd her short story collection and finished her first novel, but gave it I think 2 stars. But if I'm being completely honest, loads of the things in the blurb just really pull me in, and I also adore the cover and the title, so I'm really hoping to love it, but I'm a little bit dubious, so we shall see. Then I managed to pick up a copy of The Strangers by Katharina Vermette. This is a very beautiful book, as you can see, and this has only been published in, I think, Canada, so it took me a little bit to get hold of it, but I've read the author's first novel, The Break, and I think this follows the same characters, so I just had to pick up whatever she was going to write next because I really enjoyed The Break. Then we have Violet by Alex Hyde. I was super intrigued by this one and I picked it up within the first week or so of it being released when I saw it in Waterstones, and I think this is one I will try and read by the end of the month. Then we have the first of a few fantasy books that I've picked up in the last few weeks. I did a fantasy TBR, I think in January, which I'll link up above. I spoke about 12 books I wanted to read, and these next few books are 3 of those 12. So we have The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. This is a queer, fairly new released epic fantasy book that I love the sound of, and I also love that cover. This and the next book were both recommended by Chris over at Chris's Bookish Cauldron, who has, like, I think the best fantasy taste, well, at least the taste that most aligns with mine. So I heard him talk about this one, and that's The One Kingdom by Sean Russell, so I'm hoping to read this within the next month or so. And one I'm currently reading and absolutely loving is Rules of Ascension by David B. Coe. As you can see, there's my bookmark in this, and it's not standing up completely straight because I do break the spines when I read books, especially when I read mass market paperbacks. Obviously an awful cover, it's the only edition of it that was ever released, but yeah, I'm very much enjoying it, so I don't even mind that it's really ugly. Then moving on to the non-fiction, and you'll see all of my shelves are split with fiction on the left and non-fiction on the right. So this is Vegan Propaganda and Other Lies the Meat Industry Tells You by Ed Winters, and Indigenous People's History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. We Do This Till We Free Us, Abolitionist Organising and Transforming Justice by Mariama Kabe. This is a collection of quite short essays and interviews, I think. This is a topic I'm really interested in, and as soon as I heard about this book, I had to pick it up. This is another essay collection, although a much bigger one, and that is White Magic by Elisa Washuta. And this is a collection of essays that are sort of a blend of the personal and the sort of political, and talking about lots of social justice issues, so I'm hoping to really enjoy this one as well. Then we have The Waiting by Kum Suk Gendry Kim. This is a Korean non-fiction graphical book translated by Janet Hong, and I read the author's first graphic non-fiction, which was called Grass, and I really enjoyed it, although enjoyed is probably not the best word. It's a really difficult topic to read about, as I think this book will be too, but again, I've heard really good things. And then these last two books on this shelf, I'm currently reading both of them. The first one being Yellow Bird, Oil, Murder and a Woman's Search for Justice in Indian Country by Sierra Crane Murdoch. And this one has a beautiful cover, and that is Tastes Like War, a memoir by Grace M. Cho. So this is the second shelf, and like I said, this is all the books I owned pre-2022. The first one is The Sister Who Ate Her Brothers and Other Gruesome Tales by Jen Campbell and illustrated by Adam D'Souza. The second is Palace of the Drowned by Christine Mangan. I requested this from the publishers because I'd read the author's debut novel Tangerine and quite enjoyed it. Although I haven't read this one yet and I haven't heard anyone talk about it, so if you've read it, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. This next one I think I picked up in December when I was quite in the mood for reading mystery. This is like a crime thriller / mystery, and I read about 70 pages of it and was enjoying it, but then just sort of fell out of the interest in reading a mystery, so I'm keeping this one until I feel like reading a mystery again, and that is Winter Counts by David Hesker, Wombly Wyden. I heard quite a lot of American book reviewers talk about this one and say how much they enjoyed it. The American cover is much better than this one. And then probably one of the most beautiful books I own is Butter, Honey, Pig Bread by Francesca Equiasi. I'm hoping to absolutely adore this book, and I just realised that 3 of the books I know I'm going to say are the most beautiful are all sort of like sunset colours, so I already said I Love You But I've Chosen Darkness, and this one, and you'll see another one in a second, which is similar colours and also beautiful. Then we have a short story collection called Sleepovers by Ashley Bryant Phillips. I also think this cover is pretty striking, and I don't have many bright green books, so it really stands out on my shelves. And then we have A World Between by Emily Hashimoto. I picked this one up last year because I wanted to do a video for books that I thought readers of Sally Rooney would enjoy, and when I was sort of looking into different books that I thought would work, this one came up and I thought it sounded really intriguing and quite reminiscent of Sally Rooney's books, but this one is about a queer relationship between 2 women who meet, I think, at university. And if you hadn't guessed, this is the 3rd book that has those sunset colours that I think is completely beautiful, and that is Small Game Hunting at the Local Coward Gun Club by Megan Gale Coles. I really like long titles like this. I think they really work and really stick in my mind for some reason. You'd think short titles would, but these seem too more. So yeah, I love the sound of this one. This is set in winter, so I feel like I probably should have read it during winter. I've missed that boat for a while now in the Northern Hemisphere, but maybe I will manage to pick it up when we have a few rainy or cold days at some point. A book I'm hoping to love is Betty by Tiffany McDaniel. This is quite a chunky coming-of-age novel about the author's own mother, and I've heard nothing but rave reviews about this one. This next one, the publisher messaged me about the paperback copy, asking if I was interested, and I very much was, because I heard about it when it was first released and had been thinking I needed to pick up a copy, so I was happy when they offered to send me a copy of the paperback, and that is Little Gods by Meng Jin. I've heard quite mixed reviews about this one, but I really like the premise. This follows a mother and a daughter. I think the daughter is maybe living in the US, but the mother grew up in China, and there's a lot the daughter doesn't know about the mother, and she sort of starts to try and research that, and you see both their stories pieced together throughout the novel. And then we have another very striking cover, and that is Stephen Florida by Gabe Bash. This is completely unlike most books I'm interested in. This is about a young man who is a boxer and becomes super obsessed with it. I rarely read books like this, but I think I heard this author talk on the So Many Damn Books podcast, and I really liked what he had to say. And even though I read books predominantly by women about women, I am interested in books about men when they're really focusing in on like toxic masculinity, particularly in very male-dominated sports. So this is one of them, and I would very much like to read it this year. This is another one I was contacted by the publisher about, and that is Island by Siri Ranva Hjelm Jacobsen, and this is translated from the Danish by Caroline Waite. And again, this is one I feel like maybe I should have picked up in the winter, because I think this one is set on the Faroe Islands, which is a place I'd absolutely love to go, although I'm not quite sure it would be that welcoming for a vegan. Let me know if you've been there or you live there and what your thoughts are on that. But yeah, I really would need to get to this one. It's quite a short book. I just need to sort of set aside an afternoon to pick it up. And I have a couple of, I guess, like historical fantasies, the first one being A Song of Flight by Juliet Marillier. This is the third book in her most recent series, which is the Warrior Bards trilogy. And sadly, I haven't actually been loving it that much, so this third book's been languishing on my TBR shelf for a few months. But I really want to read this one before I let myself pick up any more Juliet Marillier series, so I would really like to get to this one in the next, I don't know, 6 weeks or so. And then this next one is, like I said, historical with a bit of the fantastical in it. This is set in, I think, like the early Middle Ages, and that is Daughter of Black Lake by Cathy Marie Buchanan. I really like this cover, and I feel like I could really enjoy this one, although again, I haven't heard very many reviews. Then I have a very small selection of YA/middle grade books, the first one being A Carter Witch by Nnedi Okorafor. I've heard amazing things about this, I think, trilogy, and I picked it up probably a year ago now, meaning to read it, and I still haven't got to it. I always feel less drawn to picking up YA and middle grade books on my shelf, but that's silly because I've heard really great things about this one, so definitely want to prioritise it. The next one is by Ash, Oak and Thorn by Melissa Harrison. I really enjoy Melissa Harrison's adult novels, and she is now, I think, on the second book of this children's book series that looks very cute, and they all have very pretty covers, so I definitely need to hurry up and read this because I think the next one might be a little bit autumnal, so it'd be nice to pick up that next one during the autumn. And then we have Monsters by Emerald Fennell. In real life, I don't ever like wear pink or buy many pink things, but I feel like I really like book covers that have an element of pink because I really love this one too. And Emerald Fennell is an actress and a writer/director, and I've enjoyed all of her work that's non-bookish before, so I would really like to pick up her books as well. Then we have another beautiful book, and that is Metal Fish Falling Snow by Kath Moore. This is a Australian young adult book that I've heard really good things about. Then Girlhood by Melissa Phoebos is a memoir in essays, which is something I really enjoy. The title of Girlhood pretty much immediately makes me want to read it. I love books that talk about girlhood and everything that entails, and I read the first few essays in this quite a few months ago and was really loving it. But do you sometimes feel like you can tell a book is going to be a favourite and you don't think you're in the right headspace to read a favourite? That's how I felt at the time, so I'm trying to be in the right headspace to read a favourite book, which sounds ridiculous. Then we have Love and Rage, The Path of Liberation Through Anger by Lama Rod Owens. Sian over at Storytime, which is a channel I love and adore, started a book club that's themed around, God, I'm going to explain this badly, I think around yoga, but also around like the body and linking the body into transformative justice and things like that. And this was the first book selected, and I bought it planning to join in, and then I think I hardly read anything that month, so I never got around to it, but I'm still very much interested in it. It sounds really intriguing and just different to anything I usually read. Then we have another completely beautiful book, and that is Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice by Leah Lakshmi Piepsna Samarashina. I hope I've said that correctly. And this is a collection of essays all about exactly what it says, people who give and receive care, and all about disability justice. And I found this one on audio on Scribd, but it's one that I would also like to read physically and be able to tab things and maybe pause over some of the more complicated sections. So this is one again that I want to get to really soon. And then we have a very slim book, and that is Don't Just Do Something, Sit There, a mindfulness retreat with Sylvia Borstein. And the lovely Shannon Burt from Storytime bought me this a couple of Christmases ago, and I always want to read it when I'm like really open and receptive to new ideas. And yeah, I think I have felt like that at a point, and I've still just not picked it up, which is very bad of me. So now I'm thinking I should try and prioritise this month, so maybe I'll be able to talk to you about this one pretty soon. And then we have Gollum Girl, a memoir by River Leira. This is quite a chunky book, and this is a memoir of the author's life with spina bifida. She is a very successful artist. It's a piece of her art on the cover, which is again such a beautiful book. And I've heard really good things about this, and I read the first page of every book whenever I get it, the first couple of pages, and I found this super readable and also beautiful. So yeah, I'm hoping this could be a favourite memoir. Then these next three I was sent from the publishers. So we have Gears for Quiz by Abigail Melton and Lilith Cooper, and this is a memoir about the author, well, both the authors, who I believe are in a queer relationship, cycling around Europe, and they're like a travelogue, and it sounds really interesting, and it's quite chunky, and that's what's put me off it, which is obviously very silly. So it's a book I need to get to, and I feel like it might be a nice book to read now the weather's getting a little bit nicer, to read about people travelling, because I assume they travel during the spring and summer, although I could be wrong. And then we have Crippled, Austerity and the Demonisation of Disabled People by Frances Ryan. And then the next one's a memoir, and that is Falling is Like Flying by Manon Uphoff. This is translated from the Dutch by Sam Garrett. And I think this is going to be really sad, which is why I've put it off, but I've heard really good things about it. And then penultimately on this shelf we have Dispatches from Syria, The Morning They Came for Us by Janine Di Giovanni. And then lastly on this shelf we have The 100 Years War on Palestine, A History of Settler Colonial Conquest and Resistance by Rashid Khalidi. I'm actually, I think, like a third of the way through this one. I picked it up in November, during Non-Fiction November, and I got to the point where I just felt like I wasn't understanding and I didn't have enough context. I think for some people who know more than me, this is probably a good entry-level book, but for someone who knew like zero about the history of Palestine, this didn't feel entry-level. So I definitely want to read this. I've kept it on my shelf. I would love to one day be able to pick this up and understand it, but I think I need something a bit simpler to begin with. So if you have recommendations, if you've read this book and perhaps read others that you think are a bit more introductory, please do recommend them. Okay, so this is the best angle I can get of the bottom shelf because my tripod just won't go low enough, so I hope this isn't too annoying. So yeah, I have the most books on this shelf, so I'll just get cracking. First one is The Other Bennett Sister by Janice Hadlow. I actually got about halfway through this a couple of years ago, when I then had a sort of prolonged period of being unable to read because of difficulty with health issues. And so it's a hard one to come back to because it sort of reminds me of that time of being pretty unwell, but I've heard lots of people talk really positively about it, so I've sort of held on to it. So let me know if you think it's worth starting again. Then I have the very chunky Utopia Avenue by David Mitchell. David Mitchell is an author who I've read all of his books, and I would have classed him as a favourite author, although I'm not sure I would anymore because it's been a long time since I picked up his novels. But this is one of those things where an author who you've previously really enjoyed brings out a book that feels really different from what they usually do. This is a realist novel about a band sort of similar to the Beatles, and it follows them for I think the 60s and the 70s. And yeah, that's just not something I would necessarily be that interested in picking up, but I picked it up because it's David Mitchell, and it's just sort of languished on my shelf for probably 2 years. Then we have Cantoras by Carolina de Robertes. I heard loads of people rave about this one a couple of years ago on BookTube. I don't know why it sat on my shelf for like 2 years unread. I think I read the first 30 pages and then didn't carry on for some reason that wasn't anything to do with the book. And I always find that once I've started a book once and put it back, I feel so much less inclined to go back to it. So I think that's entirely my fault and not the books. And I have got this as a 5-star TBR prediction. Then I have The Firestarters by Jan Carson. I read her book this year, her newest novel, and still haven't read this one, which is an earlier one, so a bit silly of me. It's usually a rule I have that I don't let myself buy a new book from an author if I haven't read the one I already have, but I broke my own rule. Then this one I saw in a bookshop and just thought it was completely beautiful and liked the sound of it, so I picked it up, and that is Willa and Hesper by Amy Feltman. This is a queer novel about 2 women, as you can see on the cover, who I think this also follows them through meeting during their university years, but I think they have a pretty tumultuous relationship where they keep sort of coming back to one another and then going away. So I think this is going to be a pretty bleak novel, and that's perhaps why I haven't been reaching for it, but I really liked the writing style when I read the first couple of pages in the bookshop. And then this one's refusing to not fall over, and that is The Border of Paradise by Esme Weijun Wang. I've had this so long, I've got the US edition. It's since come out in the UK in a completely different edition, which is nowhere near as beautiful as this one. And again, I think I could really love this, but I've heard that it's really depressing, and so that always sort of like makes me think about whether I want to pick it up. Like, I enjoy sad books, but when I hear countless people be like, God, this one's really bleak, I always have to be in the right mindset, and I think I just haven't felt that way in a couple of years. But I would like to know if you've read this and if you really enjoyed it, if you think I should prioritise it. Then another one that won't stand up, and this is another one of my absolute favourite covers of all the books I have, and that is Birdie by Tracy Lindberg. I heard really great reviews about this one when it came out a couple of years ago. As you can see, this was selected for Canada Reads quite a few years ago, and I think that's probably when I heard about it. And I've actually found this one on audio, and I really like the narrator, so I think I might listen to this one and read along. But again, I picked the first 30 pages up of this and found the voice quite difficult to get used to, and then just haven't gone back to it since. So I think that's why I want to give it a go on audio, because I think I'll get much more into the flow of the voice when I hear someone actually read out to me. Then I have a short story collection, and that is Girl Trouble by Holly Goddard Jones. This is just one of those books I stumbled across while I was like browsing Goodreads endlessly. I've never heard anyone review it, but it's got really high ratings. I actually read the first story sometime last year and really enjoyed it, and for whatever reason just didn't go back to it. It's quite long for a short story collection, it's over 300 pages, but yeah, it's one I would definitely like to read, and like the cover suggests, it's all about young women and girls, which is something I clearly adore. And then we have a pretty unknown book, and that is Awakening by Stevie Davies. This is set in the late 1800s in Wales, I think, and it sounded like the sort of historical fiction novel readers of Sarah Moss and Sarah Waters might enjoy, and I love both of their historical fiction books. So yeah, I thought I'd give this one a go, and I have no reason why this has sat here for a couple of years, because I think it sounds really intriguing and like a book I could absolutely love, so I definitely need to pick this one up. This next one I was sent unrequested, and that is The Butterfly Lampshade by Amy Bender. I've read 2 of her novels and maybe 1 of her short story collections. I really enjoyed them all, but it was quite a few years ago, and the reason I haven't been tempted to pick this one up, although I have held on to it, is because I just don't know if I'll still enjoy her work, so I think this one will be the test of that. And I know her books are really quick reads, so I could probably get through this one in like a day if I really wanted to, so I need to stop putting it off. And then another one of my absolute favourite covers, and that's Something Like Breathing by Angela Redmond. This is set in the 1950s on, I think, a remote Scottish island, and we follow 2 young girls who are like best friends. And I think there might be some sort of mystical, magical elements. And again, read the first 10 pages of this, really enjoyed it, got like waylaid by something else, and then, like I said, that thing where when I've read a bit of a book and put it down, I then feel less inclined to go back to it, even if I was enjoying the first section I read. Please let me know if I'm not the only one who's like this. And then this very cheesy looking book is The White Road by Lynn Llewellyn. This is book 5 in the Night Runner series. I really loved books 1 and 2. I hated book 3, which I think is a sort of general consensus for readers of the series. And then last year I read and really enjoyed book 4, so I don't know why I haven't immediately picked up book 5, but I would very much like to read book 5 this year and then finish off the series by reading books 6 and 7. Then we have the oldest book on my TBR, and that is Middlemarch by George Eliot. I think I might have even hauled this in like one of my first ever videos. My mum bought me this because we saw a list made by the BBC of like the 100 books you should read. Middlemarch was on it, and yeah, my mum saw this edition and thought it was beautiful. So I do definitely want to read it, I don't think this edition is going to be that comfortable to hold, so we shall see if I decide to audiobook it instead. I've heard amazing things about it. I just haven't been in a mood for reading classical books for quite a few years now, so it's sort of, because of that, just sat ignored on my shelves for 9 years. Now we have the Persephone books I haven't read, the first one being Consequences by E.M. Delafield. I think this might be about a woman who becomes a nun, and I've heard it's pretty bleak and it's quite chunky, but I would definitely like to get to it. It's just one of those books that is always sort of like at the end of the list of books for me to pick up. A much shorter one that I've heard loads of people rave about is Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day by Winifred Watson. One I think I could absolutely love is Family Roundabout by Rick Malcrompton. This is about two families during, I think, World War II who become really entangled in one another's lives, and I think both the matriarchs of the families are quite imposing individuals, and you sort of follow their lives and how they affect one another's families. And I love family dramas, and I love books that are set during wartime and focus on the people left behind. And then lastly, and this is the one I'm dubious about, is the Persephone book of short stories. I think they've done 2 or 3 of these now, but this was the first one, and this has, I think, 40 stories in it. And I've picked this up a couple of times and read the first 3 stories and didn't like any of them. It's really put me off continuing, but it feels a bit unfair because there's 40 stories. So I am going to try and get further into this. I think if I get like a third of the way through and I'm still not enjoying any, I just have to accept that whoever edited the collection has a very different taste to me, but currently I think judging it based on 3 stories is a bit unfair. So I would be interested to know if you've read this one. Okay, now we're on to the last few, and these are the non-fiction books, and that's Between Light and Storm, How We Live with Other Species by Esther Wolfson. I was sent this from the publishers a couple of years ago. No reason why I haven't read it yet. I haven't heard anyone talk about it, but it sounds very interesting to me. And then we have Beyond the Pale by Emily Urquhart. Again, this is one of those books I picked up, was absolutely loving, put down, have never picked up again, so I think I could really enjoy this one. Then we have Whose Story Is This? Old Conflicts, New Chapters by Rebecca Solnit. I don't know how bothered I am about keeping this one, to be honest, because I was sent this unrequested and I've read 1 or 2 of her books and quite enjoyed them, but I just don't know how much I'm going to get out of it. So if you've read this one and you think it's worth reading and worth keeping, then let me know. And then another sort of memoir and essay, that's I'm Telling the Truth But I'm Lying by Bassi Ikpi. I got halfway through this one, very much enjoying it, put it down because I was reading too many books and never picked it back up again. So I definitely want to pick this one up and read it from the start, and I feel like it could be a book I really love, so annoyed with myself that it sat on my shelf for a few years. And then we have Blacklisted, Black British Culture Exposed by Jeffrey Boakwe. And I bought this at the end of 2021, so I've not actually had this one for very long. I think I heard him talk on a podcast and I thought he sounded really interesting. And this is a book about, like it says, Black British culture, but it's told through chapters that each have a word that he's exploring. Some of them racial slurs, some of them not, that talk about Black British culture, and so I thought that was an interesting way to sort of discuss the topic. And then we have Wasted by Maya Hornbacher, Coming Back from an Addiction to Salvation. I actually read like a third of this one probably 6 years ago, and I put it down because it's got really small font and it's quite uncomfortable to read, and because of that I've never been drawn to picking it back up, even though I thought it was beautifully written, so I've kept it. And I now have glasses, so I might actually find this one easier to read now. And then we have Bitch Doctrine, Essays for Dissenting Adults by Laurie Penny. I read her first collection of essays and quite enjoyed them. I haven't had anyone talk about this. I picked this up in a bookshop a few years ago, so let me know if you've read this and if you think it's worth keeping and worth reading. And then lastly we have Creating Freedom, Power, Control and the Fight for Our Future by Raul Martinez, and I love the sound of this one. It's just quite a chunky book, and so because it's chunky and non-fiction, it's been sort of scaring me off, to be honest. So that is all of my unread books. Let me know if you think some of these I should just get rid of and not bother reading, or if you think there are some that I should try and prioritise and you'd like to hear me talk about. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!